right, let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank Best Friends Animal Society for tonight's webinar, for sponsoring tonight's webinar. Very, very excited about our two guests this evening, both people that I have learned just a ton of information from, and are people that I admire very much in this field. We have Peter Wolf with us and Monica Frenden. If you want to just quickly introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is Monica Frenden. I'm the Maddie's Director of Feline Lifesaving at American Pets Alive. And I have been with Austin Pets Alive since about 2012. Before that, I founded an organization in Illinois, did high volume spay and neuter and TNR. Started out as a feral cat lady. That's still where my passions remain. So we're going to talk a lot about community cats today. I sit on the Austin Animal Advisory Commission. And now I have the best job in the world. I get to go around the country and help other shelters like you guys save cats. So thank you all so much for joining.
And I'm Peter Wolf, Research and Policy Analyst with Best Friends. I've been with Best Friends for about 7.5 years now. My role with Best Friends is focused almost exclusively on community cat and TNR issues, and specifically science and policy, as the title might suggest. And we'll get into a little bit of that towards the second half of this presentation. So thank you everybody for having us tonight.
And thank you both again for being here and for presenting this evening. And thanks again to our sponsor, Best Friends. And take it away, Monica.
Thanks, Rory. Big thanks again to Best Friends, but I mostly want to give a shout out and huge thanks to the nearly 800 people who registered for this webinar. Peter and I are tremendously humbled that so many of you have signed up for this. And as someone who has dedicated her career to cats, I can tell you that last year I did not have 800 people signing up for cat webinars. And to me, that is a big indicator that things are shifting in our industry. And we are starting to finally pay attention to our humble friend, the cat, who has been ignored too often in our industry. And Peter and I are going to talk a lot about that tonight. And we're going to kind of frame this presentation a little bit differently. This presentation goes out to all of you guys on this call, your shelter workers, your rescue workers, our volunteers. And what I hope to do a little bit today is to shed a little bit of light on our friend the cat, how things have been in our industry for a long time for cats, and where I hope that they're going in the future. And I have found, and you have all found on this call, I'm sure, that we are battling our own industry quite a bit when it comes to saving cats. And we're battling a lot of myth and a lot of lore that's been around for a long time. And what I hope to do is to get you thinking a little bit. And we're going to start by talking about what we're doing in field now, in industry now, and why we're doing it. And maybe you guys have some good answers. And I want to give you something to go home with and think about. One of my favorite quotes that I talk about when I present is that the electric light did not come about through the continuous improvement of candles. And I want you to think about that as we go through this presentation, that we are not going to fix our industry's cat problems by continuously trying to improve a broken system. And so what I advocate for is a radical change to how we handle and shelter our cats. And so that's kind of what I want you to go home and think about is a radical change that is species appropriate and humane for cats. So what are we doing and why are we doing it? And how did we get into this with cats? Let me give you a little bit of background about our friend, the domestic house cat, who is in your house and in my house and one in my lap right now. So our friend, the house cat, the one that's living in your house right now, her DNA is the same as it was 12 million years ago. This is her lineage, where she evolved from. She is so perfect of a mammal that she has defied evolution for the past 4 million years, has not changed one cellular strand because she is so perfect as she is built. Kind of cool, right? But keep that in mind that your cat is the same exact cat that's been around living outside, not in your home, for 4 million years. This is a species that is thriving, right? No one can argue that this species is not thriving. They're doing very, very, very well as a species. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go on. And then I want you to think about where are cats thriving in the world today? Let's start up at the top with our beautiful little Viking cat. Cats are thriving out in the Nordic countries. And if you don't know, I should have put some poll questions in here. Where are Nordic cats typically living? Indoor, outdoor. They're outdoor cats living up there in the Nordic countries. And if we move over to the right, you've got those beautiful Siberian cats. You probably saw their little Facebook meme where they're covered in snow and ice and their beautiful fur. Those guys live outside. They're thriving there. You've got cats over in Asia. A little lucky cat over to the right. They live predominantly outside in Asia. They're thriving there. If we move down south to Australia, we've got our angry cat because we don't really like what's going on in Australia for cats right now, right? So he's looking a little feral and unhappy. But as you know, if you're familiar with the Australian community cat situation, they're also living outside in Australia, thriving there. You've got our ancestral cats up in the Africas and in the Middle East. They're almost predominantly all outside, do not live inside at all, thriving. You've got cats down in South America thriving in the jungles. They live almost predominantly outside, very rarely inside the home. And then up on the top left, we've got the American and the North American cat. And you'll notice I put in a nice chonky cat for you up there because he lives inside. We are the only continent on Earth who has this fixation with predominantly indoor cats. And as such, he's a chonky cat. We have the highest rate of feline diabetes in this country. We have the highest rate of feline behavior issues. We have the highest rate of euthanasia of any civilized country. We're doing things a lot differently in this country than other countries, and how they shelter and how they treat and how they think about cats. So just food for thought that we're doing things a little bit differently. And in a second, I'm going to ask you how you feel about that, if you feel like things are working well for our friend the cat here. But again, looking at this map, cats are thriving on every single continent on Earth other than Antarctica. And they're all doing it outside. So for my nerds in the group, and I suspect I have about 800 cat nerds all signed up, and I mean that in the best possible way. That is the highest compliment I can give you to call you a cat nerd. If you are very nerdy, I want you to look for 2 documentaries, and you can find these on YouTube. One is by Nat Geo, the other one is by the History Channel, and they both look at what would happen to the Earth after humans go extinct. And both of these studies came to the same exact conclusions, which I find very, very interesting as it pertains to cats. Sadly for our dogs, they don't do well after humans have been wiped extinct, because dogs' DNA, we have modified dogs extensively. Everybody on this call knows how we have with the brachy dogs and the short nose and the things that we have done to dogs. We have really modified them. Cats, remember that we're dealing with the same exact DNA of that cat as it was 4 million years ago. Cats have defied that. We have not modified cats enough to remove them from their natural capabilities as a species, as a mammal. So both of these documentaries came up with the same exact conclusion that not only will cats survive in the absence of humans, the species will thrive. And not only will they thrive, they will become within 1 million years the dominant apex predator on the planet. That is how well that they will do in life after people. So my cat lovers on the call, this is maybe not news to you. You maybe already have a high amount of respect for a cat and you're aware of what they're capable of as a species. And I think this is important to keep in mind because a lot of us, we all have great intentions when it comes to cat rescue. We all want to save cats. We all want to do the best. We all want less homeless cats out on the streets. But I work with a lot of people. I work out in the community and I work in field and shelters, and I feel like we are battling our own industry 90% of the time. And so this presentation, again, I really want to put out to you guys who are on this webinar with me right now, my shelter workers, my volunteers and staff, to consider some of this stuff and consider changing how we think about our friend the cat so that we can move forward in a little bit of a better way. So keep stuff like this in mind. And this is a nice quote that I think is especially appropriate given that Best Friends is our sponsor for the evening. It's the inescapable understanding that municipal animal shelters, with their essential design rooted in a 120-year-old effort to protect the public from packs of stray dogs, are failing cats miserably. Rory, I think we've got a poll question here, don't we? Can we throw it up? How many of you who are on this call right now, how many of you feel like our industry is failing cats?
People are still voting. Close this in a second.
Yeah, I think you guys can all see the poll results. 94% of people on the call feel like our industry is failing cats. As someone who has dedicated her career and her life to advocating for these cats, that hurts my heart, right? And I think it hurts all of your hearts on this call. We can do better than this. But again, we're not going to do it through the continuous improvement of candles. We need to look at a different radical change. So let's talk a little bit about how we got in this situation with cats to begin with, because if we're going to understand how to change the future, the first thing we need to look at is history, right? So how did we get here? Why are cats in this situation to begin with? Let's go back and look at the founding of our movement and how cats got thrown into this mix. So way back in the 1800s, 1800 to 1866, cats were wildlife. There were no laws protecting animals at all. In the early 1800s, the livestock were important. They were valuable. So we started creating some laws that it was, perhaps not wise to kill cows and whatnot and horses because they were expensive. Henry Bergh, of course, founded the ASPCA in 1866 to protect carriage horses in New York City. And we got around to creating some US legislation to protect all animals. But in the early 1800s, cats were wildlife. They were not in our homes. They were part of our natural ecosystem. They were not in our homes. They were wildlife. That's how we thought of them, and that's how they were treated on a legislative level as well. 1867 and 1940, cats were still wildlife. Back then, though, we started getting into rabies risk. And of course, we didn't understand rabies in the 1800s. And so we dealt with rabies how we knew best at the time, which was to round up and kill dogs. And this is a delightful little article from the New York Times back in 1877 describing how the industry dealt with the rabies fear back in the 1800s was by rounding up dogs and drowning them in the Hudson River. But during this time, cats were still left alone. We still considered them wildlife. The primary purpose of animal control all the way up to 1940 was livestock and dogs. Those were the primary objectives to protect the public from roaming packs of rabid dogs. Cats were mostly left alone. They were still wildlife. We didn't bother them. They didn't bother us. Cats entirely left alone all the way up until 1940. And that's kind of when things started going to hell in a handbasket for cats. 1940 to 1950, there was a change. We came across this clean up the streets kind of Americana culture that we started embracing. And to stop the spread of rabies, we started mandating catch and kill. Even though cats were never really a factor for rabies, they were never really going around spreading rabies in the ways that dogs were, we started catching and killing cats. And back in the 40s and 50s, there was no adoption option. This is the days of the old dog catcher going around rounding up stray animals. If you did not reclaim your cat or dog or your livestock, it was put to death. There was no adoption option. The sole focus was cleaning up the streets. So in the 40s and 50s is when things really started going downhill for cats. They started entering that system that was built for dogs and livestock. And there was no live outcome option for any of them. In the 50s and 70s, we had 1950 to 1970, we had a little bit of a culture shift going on. Shelters started forming to get those animals out of those pounds. In the 1947, kitty litter was invented. And here's where things took a really radical shift for cats in America, because kitty litter allowed cats to transition from living outdoors to living in our homes for the very first time ever. So think of that again, in 1950 is the very first time that cats started living in our homes. Remember how long cats have been living outside? Millions and millions and millions of years. They've been living in our homes for 70 years. Keep that in mind. Big difference. Outside, millions and millions and millions of years. Inside, 70 years. In 1969, we started mandating sterilization before adoption. And we did that trying to control the impact or try to control the population of animals. And of course, we can look back at that now and say, well, that's not going to work. You can spay and neuter all the adopted animals you want unless you address the outdoor cat populations. It isn't going to make a difference. Again, hindsight. But it was our own industry in the 1970s who perpetuated, endorsed, and promoted the concept of indoor-only cats. And they didn't do it to protect birds or to protect our cats from getting eaten by coyotes or hit by cars. They did it under the misguided idea that keeping your cat inside would mean less homeless cats on the street. It was shelters who promoted and came up with this concept of an indoor-only cat, and that indoor is the only option. And I know a lot of us on this call or on this webinar you are still under the belief that cats must be indoors only. Maybe some shelters are not allowing indoor-outdoor adoptions. There's a whole lot of people who have a lot of concerns about outdoor cats, which I totally understand, and you may not be wrong. But keep in the back of your head again, the cats have only been inside and only in this country for 70 years right now. 1970s to present, cats are family members now, right? We've undergone a big cultural shift in this country. Cats are now parts of our family. In 1980, you had Best Friends open. San Francisco ASPCA became the first no-kill shelter. You have Alley Cat Allies came out and they founded TNR. And that was the first time we started hearing about trap, neuter, return as a non-sheltering approach to cat management. This is all relatively new for our friend the cat, who's been around for millions and millions and millions of years. Things have really, really changed for cats. But that's where we are now. But what I want you guys to think about is what has really changed since the animal sheltering industry started in our country. Cats entered a system designed for dogs and livestock. And I want you guys to think about, have we ever really gone back to ask if we are doing the right thing by this species? Have we ever gone back and said, have we made species appropriate accommodation and policy and protocol for these cats that entered a system built for rabid dogs and loose livestock? And I think given that 94% of you said that our industry is failing cats, I think most of you would agree with me that our cats entered the system that was never meant for them. It was never designed for them. It was never built for their own interests. It was never species appropriate. And we've never, ever as an industry gone back and radically changed it to serve the cat in the best way that we know how. And so one thing I am wonderfully optimistic about in 2020, which is hard to say we're optimistic about anything in 2020, but COVID has really changed things for cats. And it's changed it in a really good way. If there's one good thing to come out of COVID, it is that our live release rate for cats has skyrocketed in this country. And our euthanasia numbers for cats has plummeted. And that has happened because our shelters closed and stopped accepting cats. So keep this in the back of your mind again. And I think a lot of you would agree with me that cats entered the system. This is how we got here, but never have we gone back and said, are we doing the right thing? Is it species appropriate? And is there a better way? So let's talk a little bit about the old system and some of the concerns that I know you guys have, and a lot of the feedback that we get from the community. Well, how can we be improving the candle, right? That's what we want to keep doing in industry, is continuously improving the candle, trying to get to an electric light. And here's why I'm gonna give you some reasons why improving the candle has not been working for us in the cat. Your national return to owner rates for dogs is about 20%. 1 out of 5 dogs will go home back to owner when he's impounded. For cats, it's about 2 to 3% nationwide. Only 2 to 3% of cats will be reunited with their owner when they are impounded. So we can statistically say, guess what? If cat gets impounded, owner is not coming for that cat. You can rest safely assured, your odds are very good, she is not getting reclaimed by her owner if she is impounded by animal control. The RTO practices that we have in industry are failing cats. We know from studies that have been out for 10, 15 years now from Julie Levy and the University of Florida, however, that stray cats are 13 times more likely to go home if they are left alone than if they are impounded. Cat knows where she is 9 times out of 10. She's just on walkabout in the neighborhood. We know from studies that have come out since COVID that stray animals are almost always still in their neighborhood when they are seized by animal control or picked up by a good SAM. Stray cats are 13 times more likely to go back home and be reunited with their family than if they are picked up by animal control or picked up by a good SAM and brought to the shelter. We're doing a disservice to cats a lot of times if we're picking up a healthy cat and taking her to the shelter for impoundment. We're reducing her odds of being reunited with her family. Peter's going to talk more about statistics as we go, but still in this country, impounded cats have a really good chance of being killed in our shelters in this country, a really high chance. If we don't euthanize them in our shelter, we're going to make them sick at a bare minimum. You guys all know that on this call. So given that we know that owner is not coming for cat and that she stands a really good chance of being euthanized or made sick in our shelters, should there be stray holds for cats at all? And this is a hot topic. This is controversial. People say we should have stray holds so that owner can come forward and reclaim their cat. But again, we know that statistically, owner is not coming for the cat. But there's ups and downsides to this. If we reduce a stray hold for a cat, that means that we, the shelter worker, I can turn around and adopt her out right away with no stray hold. That's good. On the downside of that, that also means that I, the shelter worker, can euthanize that cat immediately. That's bad. So there's controversy around this. You may go home from this webinar with more questions than answers, but my goal here is to give you something to think about. You guys are our best and brightest on this call, so I want your wheels turning, and I want you guys to help crowdsource some of these answers as we build a better system for our cats. Hopefully, most of you will agree with me on the next topic here. Should healthy cats be impounded at all, given this? And I hope by now that we've beat over everyone's head that healthy cats should not be impounded, healthy community cats. But again, there is controversy around this, and a lot of it is within our own industry. Microchips help dog return owner rates, but very few cats come to microchip clinics. And why don't they come to microchip clinics? Because cats don't travel well. Cats don't like to jump in the car and hang their head out the window and slobber. And that's dogs. That's a dog system that works well for dogs. It doesn't work well for cats. Cats don't go to microchip clinics, and microchip clinics don't go door to door chipping cats. This is a system built for dogs. It was never species appropriate for cats. So chips do work for cats, but cats don't have them. And of course, everybody on this call, you know all the reasons cited why people don't microchip their cats. Oh, she's indoor only. She's never going to get out. Doesn't like to go to the vet. There's 1,000,001 reasons why cats don't get microchipped. But that system is another one. It does not work for cats. In veterinary medicine, cats lag far behind. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir a lot as I talk here, because I know I've got 800 cat lovers on the call. But in veterinary medicine, cats are way behind dogs, both in shelter medicine and in private practice. And there's really good reasons for that. And all I'll ask you to do is follow the money. 52% of cat owners don't seek routine vet care, and 58% say their cat hates going to the vet. So if you are a private practice veterinarian and you just graduated vet school and opened a practice and you've got $1 million sunk into your new career, and the overwhelming majority of your clients are of the canine species, where are you going to do your continuing education credit? Where are you going to specialize your practice in? It's going to be in dogs, right? And so it's really easy to see why cats lag behind dogs in veterinary care, because we don't take them to the vet for 1,000,001 reasons. Veterinary care in this country is a system that was designed for dogs. Thankfully, things are starting to get a little better with that. We've got fear-free handling shelters and cat-friendly veterinary hospitals and cat-only hospitals, which I'm a huge advocate for all of those things. But cats are still way behind. And one of my favorite quotes when I was building this presentation, I talked to Dr. Julie Levy, who's one of my personal heroes. And her quote is that cats are small, quiet, convenient little creatures. It's easy to put them in a corner and forget about them. And I know that everybody on this call can resonate with that too, right? If you have an 80-pound bully breed dog, you can't really ignore that dog at the shelter, right? You can bark, bark, bark. I'm going to jump at the cage. What happens to cats when we ignore them, or when they are sick or upset? They hide in a corner. They get quiet. It's very, very easy to forget about them. And I think that's what's going on in our industry, and has been going on for 100 years now, is that we have put them in a corner and we have forgotten about them because they are quiet and convenient, and they allow us to do that as their survival mechanism. Shelters make cats sick. This is a fact. Even in the best shelter in the world, you can have the most state-of-the-art shelter. You can have portalized cages. You can have brilliant airflow recirculating through that cat room every 5 minutes. You're still going to make the cat sick. Particularly susceptible to stress. These are cats that are used to roaming miles per day, but we put them in small cages and surround them by their dominant predator. And if you're not aware, the average tomcat outside maintains a 4-mile radius. That's his territory. They're used to roaming 4 miles a day. So let me ask you this on the call. You guys are all hopefully getting your dogs out for walks every day. You've got dog enrichment programs. Everybody's going on walkies. Your cats, their species is designed to be roaming 4 miles a day. How many of you are taking your shelter cats out on walkies every day so that they are getting their species appropriate enrichment? None of us, right? You're all probably giggling. This is an absurd concept. It's really not. That's just what our industry has taught us, and the myths that we believe in our own industry about what's an appropriate care for cats. A stressed cat is a sick cat. You all know this. In many shelters, a sick cat is a dead cat. A stressed cat often appears fractious or feral. You all on this call know what happens in shelters to cats who appear fractious and feral. We don't consider the movements within our shelter. and how they impact cats. We've got studies on the books now that show if you move a cat in the first few weeks 3 or more times within the shelter from cage to cage, you have a 100% guaranteed URI rate. Yet we still have shelters who are moving cats from cage to cage every single day to clean, because that's what we do for dogs. The entire sheltering model, as we know it, does not work for cats. And then I'm going to start getting personal with some of you guys on the call. And if you've ever taken some of my courses, you know that I love nothing more than calling out my students and teasing some of you. This is how we talk about cats in this country. These are our peers. These are our colleagues. These are our fellow shelters that are talking about cats like this. We are drowning in cats. We're overrun with cats. We're just absolutely drowning in them. I don't see a whole lot of shelters talking about dogs like this. Some do, but there are less. But this is how we talk about cats in this country. And again, this is our own industry who is speaking about them like this. This doesn't make me feel, I'm sure that this doesn't make any of you on this call feel good, but it certainly doesn't make me feel good that my peers and my colleagues are talking about cats like this, because what it does is devalue the cat, right? We're also spreading a lot of lies. Peter and I were joking, and we almost called this presentation, what were we going to call it, Peter? Lies, damn lies and statistics. We talk about drowning in cats and being overrun with cats in this country, but it is a fact that nationwide, we take in less cats in this country than we do dogs. We take in more dogs than we do cats, but we don't say we're drowning in dogs. Yet when we do take in cats, even though there are fewer of them, you can see what happens to them once they're inside our shelter walls. They die in care in exponentially greater numbers. They are euthanized in exponentially greater numbers. We simply lose them in care in exponentially greater numbers. We are not drowning in cats. If we're not drowning in dogs, we are not drowning in cats. Yet this is how our own industry speaks about our cats. And then this is what I can promise you. If I know you and if I am your friend on Facebook, and if I see any of you posting this delightful pyramid message, you can rest assured that I'm going to terrorize you on Facebook and call you out on it. This is one of my personal pet peeves. You've all seen this. One cat is going to end up with 12 million cats in 11 years. Do you know what our community would look like if one cat turned into 11 million cats in 9 years? You wouldn't be able to walk to your car or drive down the street. And these myths have been around for so long. And I see my own peers, people with wonderful intentions, posting this all the time, advocating for spay neuter. Your heart is in the right place, by all means. But what I'm going to submit that you're actually doing is inadvertently devaluing cats and perpetuating myths that get cats killed. Because what this tells people is there are so many cats out there that we have no choice but to kill them. There are so many cats out there that they are worth nothing. They are like locusts. They're a pox upon your home. For a long time, and it's still going on, a lot of us have been hoodwinked into believing these myths that still exist. And we're perpetuating them within our own industry. This myth with the pyramid has been around for so long, but it's a fact right now that no organization will even take credit for starting it because it's outlandish. Statisticians have run it. It turns out that one cat can make about 95 in 7 years. Not that we need 95 more cats out in the world. No one is saying that, but 95 with cats is a lot different than 12 million cats. So again, I promise you, if I see any of you posting this on Facebook, I'm going to come for you and terrorize you. Please, please, please stop perpetuating myths like this. Okay. I love this little flyer over here. Have you seen your cat? He's mine now. The thing that we have learned coming out of COVID and where we are going with the Haas movement now, and where I am proposing that we go as an industry as we try and create the electric light, not the continuous improvement of candles, is a radically different movement where we don't shelter cats. The shelter industry, as we know it, is broken right now. It is a terrible place for cats. It's failing them miserably. We have to come up with a better way. What we know, looking back at science, looking back at the evolution of the species, is that outdoor cats are thriving. So that doesn't mean leave every cat out on the street. It's not at all what I'm saying is abandon them, leave them, let's just forget about cats altogether. But what I'm saying is that do we need to impound every cat? Remember that first slide when I said, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Maybe when you come across a cat out on the street, you ask yourself, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Does that cat really need me? Impounding community or healthy stray cats, what I'm going to submit to you as well is that you are stealing someone's cat. So I take care of my cats here in my subdivision, and there is one cat that I use as an example all the time. His name is Fatty. That's what I call him. He has a different name at every neighbor's house. And he is about 12 to 13 pounds of sassy tomcat, big fat cat. And Fatty probably has 40 houses in my subdivision that he calls home. He's very friendly, jump right up in your lap, snuggle, purr. A lot of people, even on this call, would say Fatty needs to go to the animal shelter and find an indoor home. He's adoptable. We should take him in. He doesn't need to be living outside. A lot of us on this call would take him to the shelter and say he needs to find an indoor home. Consider the backside of that, what it might look like for the 40 or 50 homes in my subdivision that know that cat and have taken care of that cat for years and love him. If Fatty were to disappear, first of all, I wouldn't go looking for him for several days because he's at the neighbor's house. He's on walkabout. I don't know. This is one of many reasons why people don't reclaim their cats from the shelter. But then my entire neighborhood would be devastated if anything happened to Fatty. There would be 40 or 50 households here who would grieve the loss of Fatty. We would all be outside looking for him. He is loved. Fatty has more houses to go to this Christmas than I do. So consider what it looks like when you impound a healthy, friendly cat that you have found outside. Consider what the backside of that looks like, that you have humans who love that cat. Because if it is a friendly cat, how do you think it got that way? Someone is loving it. Someone took care of it. And I'm talking about friendly community cats, not an abandoned stray cat. I'm talking about cats who live outside and have caretakers. If it is a friendly cat, it got that way because someone put time and effort into that cat, and it has a home. And that home may look different than what you think is ideal for it. We need to reconsider what home means. And just because it's something you don't necessarily want to live outside on my patio doesn't mean that Fatty doesn't, right? I always use this as a joke. If Jeff Bezos came to my house, he would think my house is completely unacceptable and he would never live here. And, I should be maybe taken away and find better digs, right? But my home is my home. I'm thriving here. And so I want you to consider that when you find a cat on the street. Does she look happy and does she look healthy? It doesn't matter if she is friendly. If she is thriving in her home, respect her home and the people who care for her there. Cat is not getting reclaimed, right? 97% chance that she is not getting reclaimed. If she is in good health, we know from just sheer science that she is more likely to go home if we leave her on the street. Spay and neuter her, vaccinate her, microchip her by all means, but she is more likely to be reunited with her family if she is not impounded in this country. And remember that if and when we do impound her, odds are very high that we're going to make her sick, and odds are still entirely too high in this country that we're going to euthanize her. It's a sad reality that all of us on this call, including myself, are the #1 danger to cats in this country. It's not cars, it's not coyotes, it's not all the dangers that do exist for cats outside. The #1 killer of cats in this country are those of us sitting on this call who have dedicated our lives to doing better. And that's what we need to think about and change, because historically we can look back on these numbers and we know that things are not working for cats in this country. So going forward, 2021 and beyond, assuming we get to 2021 and this year doesn't finally wreck us all, stop stealing cats is the #1 thing that I would implore you to do. Stop rounding up healthy community cats, put them back when they do come in over the counter, embrace SNR, embrace TNR as a species appropriate model, a humane model. Look back at the evolution of the species, remind yourself that cats are thriving on every other continent on Earth, and they're doing so outside in incredible conditions, and that they've been doing that for 12 million years. And ask yourself if things being impounded in a 30 by 30 stainless cage inside the shelter is really an improvement. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Peter, who's going to science us up now.
Okay, and let's see. If you can stop sharing, I'll start sharing my screen. Oh, there we go. Share screen. There we go. Oh boy. Stop share. Let's try that again. Share screen. Desktop. There we go. And let's see if I can do it. There we go. All right, there we are. Can everyone see okay? Rory, you want to give me a heads up? Or Monica, thank you.
Yes.
So thank you. I just want to sort of follow up with some specific statistics that all kind of fold into the general theme that Monica presented. That is myths or misinformation that become significant barriers to better life-saving programming. And I want to talk about two specific aspects. First, public health, and then later I'll get to cat welfare. And when it comes to public health, there's kind of two aspects or two elements I want to talk about tonight. The first being rabies. And so some of you may have seen this quote from, or have seen it repeated elsewhere in the media or something like that, about cats being the #1 domesticated species, passing rabies infections to humans. This is from the 2016 book, Cat Wars. And again, there's a cause hypothesized here, right? The presence of all these stray, unvaccinated, free roaming cats. And then something in last year in Florida Today actually went further. Instead of trying to make the connection between just free roaming cats and rabies cases, they actually went further and suggested that it's actually TNR and return to field programs that are responsible for this. And you can imagine, you see these sorts of stories in the media, this is a significant barrier. The public, who then contact the city council, it makes it very hard to do these sorts of programs. In fact, when you dig into it, you can go back to 1975, look at data from the CDC, and what you find is over that time period, cats were responsible for exactly 1 case of rabies in humans. And you can see here, the unknowns often are wildlife, but if it's a bat bite, it's often hard to determine. So it's assumed that a lot of those are bat bites. You can see wildlife. Most of the dogs shown on here are actually, the bite occurred outside the country, and these are servicemen and women who are again, overseas as part of their military service, and then are treated at home, so they get tracked by CDC, but it didn't occur here. What I find most interesting here are the transplants. So these are organ transplants and transfusions. And like, have you ever heard that these account for 7 times the number of rabies cases in humans in the US as compared to cats, right? That's the reality here. And in fact, you would have to go back to 1960 to find the next most recent example of a cat transferring rabies, the rabies virus, to a human. And in fact, that happened when this woman was vacationing in Guatemala. She came home before she was treated. So, that even that did not happen in this country. So again, untangling all these, there's just not a lot of evidence to support those claims, but because it's scary, it gets a ton of traction in the media. It's also worth asking the question, even if we're really, really concerned about cats transmitting rabies to humans, why on earth would you restrict or prohibit TNR or TNVR? I wasn't entirely consistent in the presentation. I sometimes included the V for vaccination, sometimes not. Obviously, we want to vaccinate it. We've heard a lot in the last several weeks about herd immunity. And this little illustration shows what that could look like if 50% of a particular herd of cats were vaccinated against rabies. And you see at the bottom, you've got 8 cats and 1 of them is infected versus all the others. Now, what happens if you remove, right, traditional, as Monica was just talking about, if you remove 2 of those cats, and those are the orange circles here, now look at the scenario you get when you get to the 3rd disease generation, the bottom of that pyramid, right? Whole lot more cats infected than you had in the first scenario. So obviously this is something we want to promote, is more vaccination. The second public health item I want to talk about tonight, we probably have all heard about toxoplasmosis, which is caused by the Toxoplasma gondii parasite. And if you've heard about it, it's probably been with one of these sensationalist headlines. This was from several years ago in the Atlantic. I think most of us on this call can agree our cat might be making us crazy, but it's nothing to do with toxo. Mental health problems, again, okay, maybe there are mental health problems, probably have nothing to do with the cats. This is one of my favorites. This is from, I don't know if it's Live Science or Live Science. I think it's Live Science from a very popular website. And this was in 2011. Again, really scary headline, right? Mind controlling parasite, increased brain cancer. This sounds pretty scary. The following year on the same website, good news, your cat won't give you brain cancer. You want to guess which of these got a whole lot more media attention and Facebook shares? Of course, it was the first one because it's the scarier one, right? That's just kind of how these things work. I won't go into a lot of detail right here. As I mentioned previously, if any, I will put up at the end of the presentation, by the way, I'll put up my email address. Anyone looking for any of these studies that are cited, feel free, please, please, please email me and I'll send you all the details here. But the larger point is when you start drilling into these studies, the really large studies find that there really aren't the kind of causal relationships that are often suggested in these headlines. We've all heard the expression correlation is not the same as causation. And that applies with most all of these studies. You might see what appears to be a relationship there, but again, you get into the larger studies, the ones that are done in more detail, and you find out that there's very little evidence to support those scary headlines that we see so often. It's also true that the infection rate in this country has declined significantly over the last several years. I haven't looked at the most recent data yet, but would expect that it continues to decline a little bit. Again, you don't see this in the headlines, right? It's not a very exciting headline to say that there's less of this. It's also true, and this is really interesting, this is from a study done by some folks at UC Davis. And what they found was that managed feral cats, and that's what they called them, these were cats they obtained from a shelter. Okay, these were shelter intake cats, much less likely to be infected with this parasite than what they called unmanaged feral cats. And these came from wildlife areas. So these are the cats who were really surviving on their own. That the shorter bar, the first one, those are cats who were relying on humans for their sustenance. So there's a lot to be said for actually managing these colonies like most of us do if we actually want to reduce the risk caused by this parasite. And again, I want to shift a little bit to animal welfare concerns. These are maybe more than the public health concerns. These we often, as Monica said, like this is the kind of stuff that we might share on social media or something like that, well-intentioned, but can be really, really harmful. This is a quote, we've probably all seen similar quotes. This one's actually from PETA talking about all the risks that are faced by outdoor cats. We know there's risks that outdoor cats face. I don't let my cats go outside for that very reason. But to suggest that because of those risks, we're supposed to round them all up and bring them to the shelter for a one-way trip, that's a whole other conversation. Another quote here, again, basically the same theme, right? All the risks outside. And so again, what's implied, if not stated directly, is these cats needed to be rounded up, taken to the shelter, and not come home. Another quote from Cat Wars about the short lives that cats live. Then when you talk to somebody who works in a shelter, or did, he no longer does, John Cicerelli up at San Jose, right? All these previous quotes, these are from folks who are not familiar with the situation that so many of us on the call are familiar with. And again, he talks about most of the cats being healthy, they're vibrant. What they need from us is sterilization and vaccination. They don't need to be rounded up. And when you start looking at the data, it supports that. This again is from San Jose. And these are cats brought in DOA, dead on arrival. Typically that means hit by car. And what you see is after San Jose started doing their enormous return to field program, things got better for cats, right? The thinking is the males in particular were roaming less and less likely to get hit by a car. And so that explains, again, this significance, like a 20% decrease in DOA shelter intake, which is enormous. This is from a Julie Levy study from 2014. And you can see here, 2,366 cats total. And this shows how many, relatively speaking, how many were in really rough shape. So rough that they needed legitimately to be euthanized upon intake. And that's that tiny little sliver at the top. The vast majority healthy. They could be returned, they could be transferred to rescue, they could be adopted. Another, in this case, it's a larger sample, almost 73,000 cats. But again, the same trend, right? Vast majority are returned, a smaller fraction are adopted or transferred. How many are really, really in rough shape? Half of 1%. So, and this really speaks to, Monica touched on this, the idea of returning friendlies, right? And everything she said is true. Someone's going to miss those guys if they're not returned. They're social for a reason because they have their people, often many people in the same community. And if that concern comes from a concern for their welfare, I worry about these guys outside. We know the vast majority of these guys are doing really, really well outside. And then just last, I want to touch on FIV and FELV, sorry. Again, this is, comes from a good place. We're concerned about their welfare. When they've actually done studies and looked at this, the rates among these cats, and again, it's helpful to be sterilized, because for FELV, the most common transmission route is moms to kittens. For FIV, it's deep bites from males fighting as part of competing for mates. So sterilizing, everything gets better in terms of FIV and FELV. And so, in summary, just 3 points really. Unlike what you might see in the news media, TNVR or TNR protects and promotes public health. The vast majority of these cats are healthy, and these programs can improve community cat welfare. They're in no way a threat to the welfare of the cats we care so much about. And again, you can feel free to email me. I'm happy to share any of these studies or continue the conversation by way of email. I would also, one final pitch for the Feline Research Council. In a lot of these issues that come up, whether it's about the public health issues, again, rabies or whatever, whether it's cat welfare, a lot of this stuff is addressed on the National Feline Research Council website. So I encourage folks to check that out. And again, I'm part of that effort, so feel free to email me if you have any suggestions, or you think maybe there's something missing from that site, or you have any feedback. Please feel free to let me know. And with that, I think Rory is maybe going to moderate some Q&A.
Yes, and we do have quite a few questions that came in. I'm just trying to grab them. So the first question is, what do you tell someone who shows up with the 9 cats that he's trapped on his property and demands that you take them or he'll kill them?
I'd be happy to jump in. I'm an ops person. I'm your local friendly ops director who likes boots on the ground, likes doing hands-on work. So I have personally dealt with hundreds of said gentlemen who show up and try to bring you 9 cats over the counter and tell you that they're going to take them home and kill them if you don't bring them. What I believe and what I think is true, and I welcome your argument and conversation about this. Anyone who shows up to the cat shelter is probably there to do the right thing. We aren't going to go have a beer at the end of the night with this gentleman who brought us 9 cats and is threatening to kill them, right? But we have trained people for the last 150 years in this country that this is what you do with unwanted and stray animals. We have trained them that we are to bring them to the shelter. That's where they belong. That's what we have trained people to do. So going forward, we have a large educational component that we need to employ here that is retraining the public that the shelter is not what we do. It's not where we bring community cats. And so your job as the frontline shelter staff in dealing with this gentleman is going to be re-educating him. We are not the killing factory. In fact, we're not going to do that. This is why. It's not going to solve your cat problem, sir. As soon as I take these cats from you, more are going to come in because you are providing a lovely resource for the cats, whether you mean to or not. Cats only live where there are resources and where they thrive, or else they would move on. So I can take these cats from you, sir, but it's not going to help solve anything. Here's what I can do for you instead. I can spay and neuter them for you. I can vaccinate them for you. I can microchip them for you. So all those nuisance behaviors that I hear you talking about are going to go down. They're going to fend off their territory from intact cats moving in. And he may come back and say, I don't care, you crazy woman, I want these cats gone, or I'm going to kill them. And to which I would usually say, no, you're not. You're here at the shelter because you're trying to do the right thing, and you're not going to kill them. Come on, be serious. Nobody brings their cats into the municipal shelter and says, hi, I'm about to commit a felony on 9 different counts, and admits to it and then goes home and does it. I'm not suggesting that people don't do bad things to cats. People do bad things, period. They are of the smallest percentage. And I'm the biggest pessimist in the world, as Rory or anyone will tell you. But it's a tiny, tiny percentage of people who actually do bad things to cats. But keep in the back of your head that anybody who visits the animal shelter, 9 times out of 10, even higher than that, they're there to do the right thing. And they may need some education. They may need some help from you and your staff, because they don't know what TNR and SNR means. And they really don't know what happens to cats when they bring them in over the counter. The majority of people think that you're going to take those cats over the counter and you're going to find them a loving home and everything is happy and peaceful and life is good and rainbows shoot over your shelter all day long. When you tell them the reality of the situation, they don't really want that. And they're really not there to kill the cats. So a huge component of what we need to do going forward is re-educating the public that you don't bring cats to the shelter. This is the last place a cat should be. And here is the correct solution instead. And we've navigated this in Austin. I navigate this every month on the advisory commission as we normalize what sheltering should look like for cats in this country. I completely get it. And it does involve us re-educating. And I can tell you that the community will get there. There's not a community on earth who wants to spend their tax dollars killing cats. And they just need to be re-educated. And we are the ones who put these false ideas into the community's head. And so we are going to have to be the ones that now correct them and say, whoops, sorry, we were really wrong the last 150 years, my bad. Here's how we're going to do better going forward. That's on us. That's our burden.
Yeah, Peter mentioned in the chat, we've normalized intake, and really seems that we have. What's your opinion in regards to TNR with kittens?
You want to take it, Peter, or you want me to?
You said you're the ops person.
Yeah, I'm the ops person. I have personally trapped and TNR'd and transported over 5,000 of my own community cats in my career. So here's what I will tell you. And I've done that both in the rural Midwest, where things were very, very, very grim for cats. And I've done that here in Austin, which is the safest city in the country to be a cat. So I'm well aware of all of your concerns regarding kittens. Here's what we know. Kitten mortality in field is about 50%. They are not part of their ecosystem yet because they were just born. Ideally, in a perfect world, we're not going to TNR kittens. We're going to bring them into adoption and get them a loving indoor home. That's our ideal world. I can tell you in Austin, Texas, I can do that. In Austin, Texas, I have no reason to TNR a kitten. I can get it a home all day long. I have the resources. I got the community behind me. I'm not going to say things are easy cheesy in Austin, but they kind of are compared to a lot of you. I have worked in some of the highest kill shelters in this country, and I cut my teeth in a terrible part of the country to be a cat. And in those parts of the country, what I will tell you is to TNR kittens all day long. Because in some of the hardest shelters I've worked at, if you were a cat and you entered that shelter, you stood a 98% chance of being killed within 5 minutes of intake. Would I rather TNR a kitten than inject its vein with blue juice? All day long. So that's what I will tell you, is that yes, the mortality rate for kittens is 50%. The death rate in your shelter might be 98%. So do the math, look at the big picture. If that kitten stands a better chance on the street, if it's going to drain your resources and you can't provide a species appropriate live outcome for that kitten, then TNR it and give it a fighting chance. And this is what I tell kind of my students when I talk about working cat programs and whatnot too. If you were a cat, if I impounded you and said, hey, we impounded you, there's a 98% chance I'm gonna take you out back and hit you over the head with a shovel and kill you. Or option B, I'm gonna put you back and you stand a 50% chance. All of you on this call would say, yeah, I'll take the 50% chance, you crazy woman. Let me go, right? If you need to, TNR those kittens. If you have the resources and can do better, then do better. But if you can't do better, if you are one of those shelters that is struggling with cats, TNR those kittens and do not lose sleep about it. Feel good about what you are doing.
Thanks, Monica. This is an interesting question. How do animal services workers convince community cat advocates that SNR is preferable when they have the experience and don't value our perspective on cats?
I feel like I'm monopolizing, Peter. Do you want to?
No, go.
Yeah, this is, I get this personally. I am, even in Austin, we are continually hearing from very well-intentioned, kind, wonderful people who love cats and they want us to do better for cats. And in Austin, we get the added bonus of everyone saying, this is Austin. We should be able to achieve anything. And they're not necessarily wrong. What I would say to those people is what I've said to you guys is, look at the species. Is the species appropriate care? I know we have good intentions, but here's what I'm telling you. I can build the best shelter in the world for $36 million and it will make that cat sick and owner is not coming. No matter what I do, owner is not coming for that cat. I'm going to make her sick. I'm going to spend all kinds of money. I'm going to steal her from a family who loves her, who's going to miss her, to make her sick and maybe euthanize her and spend all kinds of tax dollars. Or I could respect the home she has, even though it's not the home that I would necessarily choose for her. I can give her an inspection when she comes in over the counter and say, you're fat, you're happy, you're friendly, you're healthy. Clearly you're doing okay where you are. And I can respect her for the species that she is. I can say, damn, you're a competent animal. You haven't even changed your DNA in 4 million years. You're doing okay. And I can respect that home to her means behind a junkyard, and that's not my position to judge, nor the person who's caring for her. And I can say, you're doing okay. I'm going to respect you and the caregiver who's doing the best they can. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to make your life better by spaying, neutering, vaccinating, and being a resource to that caregiver and empowering them to do better. But I am, that's what I would tell people. That's what I tell all my students. We have to fundamentally shift the way we think about cats. The system that we have built is a dog system. It's a livestock system. It doesn't work. And so you have to change that fundamental mindset that all of these volunteers and advocates and staffers have of applying that dog system to cats. It's not appropriate. It's never been appropriate. Rechange your thinking, look back on the species and go, why am I here and why am I doing this? It's never been appropriate for cats.
If I could just add real quickly to that, Monica, too, I think what often is overlooked, and somewhat understandably, because it is a little complicated, but when we're able to shut off the conveyor belt of cats and kittens coming into the shelter, that it buys up lots of bandwidth, right? And it means you can reallocate resources. So, and this will touch on at least a little bit some of the other questions I see popping up in the chat about how do you know like each individual cat, right? That requires a lot of time and energy and maybe door knocking to find out who's feeding and get the story. That's a lot of resource. You can't do that if you've got the conveyor belt running coming in the front door of cats and kittens, right? Once you're able to minimize that though, that buys you all kinds of bandwidth to, again, to do some door knocking, to deal with medical issues, to think differently about your housing. Who knows, maybe your shelter staff will finally get to take their 15-minute break for the first time in their career, right? You buy yourself bandwidth. And by the way, that spills over into dogs. Maybe now you can do play groups because again, you don't have so many staff whose sole job is to manage the fire hose of cats and kittens coming into the shelter, right? So it seems really difficult when it sounds like, wait a minute, you're asking us to add all this stuff to our to-do list when we're already buried with work. And it's like, yeah, but if you can shut the fire hose off a little bit, you've bought bandwidth to take care of that to-do list. So it's a little tricky, easier to see in practice, I think, than probably to explain theoretically.
It's a great point, Peter. And I can't keep up with the scroll of the chat here. Peter and I have both put our emails into the chat so that you can grab us and ask us all these questions. But I wanted to just touch on Peter's point really quickly. COVID has shown us that when you stop the conveyor belt of cats coming in, you can expand your resources and help the cats who really need us. So one of the questions in the chat was, well, what cats do we take in and help then? The answer is the ones who do need us. I don't know how many shelters I have helped through COVID now who have said, all of a sudden we can treat diabetic cats. All of a sudden I have resources to start saving leukemia cats for the first time ever. Oh my God, this is wonderful. When you stop that conveyor belt, you can take in the cats who really need you. That may be your owner surrenders. That may be the kittens in field that you don't want a TNR. That may be the diabetics, the Felbies, the major medical, the behavior cats. All of a sudden, when you stop that conveyor belt of cats who don't belong there and we never had any business having, we can help the ones who really need us. And I think that's what all of you on this call really want to do, is save the cats who really need us. But we're wasting all of our time saving the cats who don't need to be saved.
And you just mentioned something really critical, Monica, is the owner surrenders who are not eligible for SNR, shelter neuter return programs, right? Typically also not eligible for working cat programs, but some exceptions are made. But, and again, you touched on how high intake leads to sickness, which can be, a common cold can be fatal in a shelter environment if you're a cat, right? We know that, you mentioned that. And so think about this, the owner surrender suite, completely adoptable cat comes in as an owner surrender. The only outlet for that cat is adoption or transfer. But if you're packing that shelter with all the community cats, now that perfectly adoptable cat gets sick, and now a live outcome is virtually impossible in some shelters for that cat. So again, it's a trade-off of saying, like, how can we minimize intake so the ones who truly need us get what they need from us, and the others, they go back to live with their family and friends and their people who care for them, and enjoy having 3 different meals a night.
Great point. This has been terrific. We have about 12 unanswered questions in the Q&A and more in the chat. And I do think that we should probably schedule a Q&A additional webinar with the two of you, if that's something that you're open to.
I'm just reading through this chat, and you know me, my heart is cold and dead inside, but my God, you guys are making, I'm sure I speak for Peter too. You are really humbling us. And I can't tell you how much it means to me that there are 800 people signed up for this webinar who all of a sudden care about cats. Peter and I joked going into this that we feel like we have been beating on the cat drum for years and years and years, and no one heard us. And I feel for the first time now going into this with all of you people on the call that someone hears us. So thank you all for that. Thank you for making my night. I hear you, Peter hears you, and damn it, the rest of the industry is going to hear us, right?
And you all have done so much for cats. So thank you both for everything that you've done for cats, and continue to do. And I will try to get something scheduled so we can answer all of these questions. We'll try to email the group answers to some of these questions as well. And I thank you all so much for being here. And thanks especially to Monica and Peter. And thanks Best Friends Animal Society for sponsoring this webinar tonight.